Hello, Mr. Mayor. Can everybody hear me?
Yes,
Okay, good. I anything back. I think we got a quorum, looks like.
we do.
Let's call the meeting to order, please. Councilman Seekings, I'm gonna ask you to give a few words if you could.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we might just take a moment of silence as we reflect on all of those around us who have been subject to some really tough circumstances and pray that what lays ahead for those in Florida will not be what is predicted. Amen, and thank you.
Amen.
Amen.
All right. As we get started on this agenda, there are a couple of existential items that we need to have added to the agenda.
Yeah,
Uh,
Mr. Chairman, I was going to make a motion before we began this meeting, if you don't mind, to amend the agenda. Actually, it's a couple of different motions, if you'll bear with me.
at your disposal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and fellow members of the committee. I'm going to make two motions to add three different items on our agenda, all for different but exigent circumstances. And the first is a motion to amend the agenda to add a vote to include and thereafter prioritize transformer relocation by Dominion at 141 Meeting Street, which is the old SCE&G lot, as a non-standard service project. The reason for making this motion and the exigency is this, and I'll talk more about it when we actually take up this motion if it gets out of the agenda. The project that is going to be had on that lot is actually three projects in one. And what's holding it up, or all three of them up, is the fact that there needs to be undergrounding work and transformers moved. And until those are done, nothing can happen. And there's a timeline of less than a year to get that project not just started, but completed. So moving forward with moving the transformers under the NSSF program is a must, and it has to happen quickly. So that would be the exigency under which I make the motion to include on the agenda.
I'd second it.
Properly moved and seconded. Any more discussions on those reasonings? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Councilman.
And then I have a second motion, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, to also add another matter to our agenda. It's actually two. And this would be a motion to amend the agenda to add two new items regarding the municipal operations site. Just briefly, CSX is going to be installing three subsurface pipes, the pipe that the tracks go sort of through along the edge of that site, to satisfy the stormwater requirements underneath their railroad tracks. Originally, we were going to have to perform that work on our own, but now at a substantial cost to the city. Now it's going to be conducted under the terms of the construction agreement with CSX. And in light of the long lead time in order to order the materials and the potential loss of available crews because of the hurricane, CSX wants to expedite that order and work. So what's going to be put on as for consideration by this committee are two agreements. One is a construction agreement for the work at an estimated cost of $723,000. And the second is for materials at an estimated cost of $265,000. And again, we can take that up more when we talk about it, but all these costs are allocated through the bond for the municipal operations center and site. So it's a motion to move that site forward with those two items. And so I move to add that to the agenda.
Second.
Seconded by the mayor. Any more discussions on that being added to the agenda? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the third one, Councilman.
Well, that's it. The second and third were those
okay.
two. Yeah.
All right, great.
So,
all right, now let's go. Well, thank you. Let's go to item B. Let's go back to the agenda. Item B, the approval of Barberry Woods. Who's going to address? Yeah, put a motion on the floor and then we can have.
I'd move for approval on this one.
Properly moved, and we get a second out there. Somebody, you get a second to that motion?
Second.
Probably moved and seconded. Any discussions on this Barberry Woods amendment here? Amendment number 2. Mr. Fountain, you want to address it briefly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is basically an approval. There'll be a resolution at council to increase the amount of grant funding from $4.6 million by an additional $330,000 for the Barbary Woods project. The South Carolina Office of Resilience has some additional funding, has agreed to add it into this project budget. No change to match or project scope.
That's a great grant. Any questions of Mr. Fountain? Hearing none? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item C, well, yeah, nobody opposed. Item C, approval of the mayor to execute an in-kind memorandum of understanding with the U.S. Corps of Engineers regarding the preliminary pre-construction engineering and design study for the coastal storm risk management project. We have a motion on this?
I'll move for approval.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Now discussion on it. Who's going to address that? You, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I can address it just briefly. That we've discussed this in a couple of different times, but just for reminder and refresher, the original PED agreement that we had with the Army Corps of Engineers, that was being contemplated rather, we never signed it, gave unilateral control over the design and alignment ultimately to the Army Corps. We could have stopped paying for our share, but the document itself gave them the ability to continue moving forward without us and designing it and building it however they deemed appropriate. We were giving up all of our rights. And so that was a big heartburn for me. So we spent a lot of time working with the Army Corps on whether or not we could come up with an alignment in a potential design that we could submit for a revised PET agreement. And they agreed to allow us to do that with the condition that they approve our defined scope in advance. And the reason they wanted to approve the scope was so that it's a bit of a technicality, but they needed to have this MOU in place so that any funding that we put towards that design would count towards our contribution, the 35% contribution. So this agreement is to allow us to enter into that MOU with the Army Corps that gives us the control over the design and alignment.
Councilman Seekins, you got your hand up?
Just briefly, Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mayor, for that explanation. For those of us who've been working on this for as long as we have and have watched the evolution of our wrestling match with the Army Corps about what actually may come of the 3x3 project, this is really an incredible turn of events for the positive for the city. Being able to take control of not just the alignment, which means where we're actually going to build the perimeter protection, but what the design of it might look like has been something we've been longing for, as you know, Mr. Chairman, many, many, many years. So while it's no guarantee under this agreement that the Army Corps will accede to all of our design requests, it certainly is a lot better place than we've been in for the last 5 years. And I think it really puts us in a place where we can have a project that suits our needs and fits the eye of where we're going with all this. So I heartily endorse it. And, I think, Mayor, we have some money put aside to take the lead on this. So effectively what we're doing, and you may recall when this first came, one of the options we could have taken was what's called the locally preferred plan in advance of pre-construction design and engineering. And that's effectively what we're doing. We're doing what we should have done 5 years ago. And that's no fault of anybody here, but it's never too late to right a wrong. And this is the first step in doing that. So I highly endorse it. And I think we're going to get a much better conversation and ultimately product out of this.
All right. Any other discussion? Councilman Gregory?
No.
Amsterdam, you have any comments on this?
No, I don't.
Okay, great. Listen, anytime we can have input on what's going to be put in place for all to see, I mean, that's great working with the Corps on that. We after all, we partners, right? So we should see. So this is great work on that. Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion, please say
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Item E. Is that right? No, item D.
I'd move for approval on this, and I'm happy to take this one as well.
Okay, we get a second. Anybody second the mayor's motion?
Second.
These seconds are getting tough to come out.
Got
Discussion.
mutes on. Yeah, so
Yeah.
just, this is the, contract. The Black and Beach scope is what is approved in the, Army Corps MOU. So it ties, verbatim to it, as I understand it. And while we do have allocated $3.2 million in this year's budget for the PED agreement or the PED work, our share of it, this would be reallocating a portion of that, the $745,000 of that 3.2 to go towards this study.
All right. Any input on that from committee members?
Again, this was money we were going to spend anyway, and someone else was going to spend it on our behalf. Here we're spending it our own behalf, doing it our own way with our own team. So again, another really positive step. So
I couldn't agree
ready.
more. Call the question. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Item E, who the mayor allocate additional 400,000 toward city's cost of partnership, tidal flooding. What's the
Once
pleasure?
again, Mr. Chair, I'll move for approval on this and happy to take it up. And
All right, the mayor moves. Who's going to apply the second? Councilman
everyone's on mute.
Gregory.
Second.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
So this goes back to the tidal and inland flooding study that I think is pretty critical, that we not just look at the peninsula, but we also look at other parts of the city. To get this initiative going, our share of the first tranche of payment is $400,000. That was not contemplated in the 24 budget. So I'm recommending or offering that we would use part of the $3.2 million to go towards this, our pro rata share. And so we can kind of, they're technically two different studies, the perimeter protection on the peninsula and the tidal and inland flooding. But I think it's going to be important to message them together and to run them in parallel as much as possible. So I think this would be a good potential reallocation of part of that $3.2 million that's been allocated in this year's budget.
And the 3.2 million, I see Ms. Wharton on here, is that was allocated to the general fund or stormwater funds?
That is hospitality funds.
Okay.
And then for this study, that would be general fund reserves.
Okay, good deal. All right, thank you. Any additional discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Item F, an ordinance to amend the city of Charleston, South Carolina, Chapter 2, Administration, Article 4, Boards and Commissions and Divisions. That's enough. Let's call it.
I'll save you the time there, Mr.
I
Chair.
know.
I'll move for approval, and I'm glad to take this one too. So
Second.
Okay. Probably moved and seconded. Good.
So this was part of the water plan unveiling where we'd like to revisit it was originally called, I think, help me, Councilman Seekings, like the perimeter protection
3x3 committee basically is what it was. And it was just the peninsula.
It was just a peninsula. So what we're doing now is expanding it to the entire city. And we have I believe we have it allocated to where we would have an engineer and or architect, somebody in the design business, that brings technical expertise. We would have somebody from the environmental. We would have at least 2 council members. And we would have a representative from each area, like Johns Island, West Ashley, Daniel Island, James Island, and the peninsula. So I think it's a good allocation. And this would just be changing the makeup and name of that original committee to encompass the entire city.
Any comments? Well, I do. I can't thank you enough for this. Matter of fact, we had I'll pay my $5. We had a hell of a wrestling match on this last year because it being peninsula and peninsula only, and we all know the water plan and flood protection is going to take all of us in this city to push in the right direction at the same time. So having input from areas of the city and much input from citizenry as we can, I believe will make us successful in whatever the comprehensive funding approach will be to the ward plan. But anyway, so you already moved, but I'm gonna call that question. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? This will probably just slip through, but really that's a victory for all of Charleston right here having input on that. Item G, 141 141 Meeting Street. This involves the moving of the transfer. We didn't have a cost associated with that.
We do. If you will, Mr. Chairman, I might, Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, I'll take this one up really quickly if it's okay with you.
Well, first we
I'll
get
make
a
a motion
then you
and
can-
I'll second it.
Okay, properly moved and seconded. Now discussion, Councilman Seekins.
So just really briefly, by way of background, as you will recall, the old SEAG property, which we now call 141 Meeting Street, was purchased by a private entity some year and a half or 2 years ago. In turn, they're going to sell off the E.B. White, which is the old historic building, the E.B. White building on the
Right,
very
right.
southern portion of the property to the Gibbs. The rest of that property is going to be turned into open and public space, basically a park. It's going to be called, what's it called? American Gardens. And then the E.B. White building is being sold to the Gibbs for $3 million, half of which is being paid by the Gibbs, half of which is being paid by the city of Charleston. That money's already been allocated. In order to do the park project and to be able to renovate what has now been a building that has sat fallow for a number of years, there are certain things that have to happen. One of the things that's happened is that the purchaser of the property and the seller of the E.B. White building to the Gibbs has graciously allowed another 23 feet off the back as part of that sale without requiring any more money for it. That will allow an addition to be built so the building can be functional with things like, restrooms, offices, and all the like. What's in the way of both of the projects are transformers that were previously put there by SCE and Dominion to drive, among other things, the underground wiring in the lower part of King Street. And so the moving of those transformers really is kind of the kickoff to the projects being able to move forward. So we've arranged with Dominion to allow NSSF funds to pay for that, non-standard service funds. The amount total for the project is $480,000. And so the portion that would come out of the fund would be $240,000. And then the match from Dominion would be another $240,000. It would be no additional cost to the city because those money's already in the bank, and no additional cost to the Gibbs, which is a good thing as well. And again, as I said, this needs to happen. Just the moving of these transformers needs to happen quickly because really nothing else can happen until those transformers are moved. So there is a grand plan by BMOC and their team to get the park up and running by next October. The Gibbs is going to have to fall in line behind it and do all their at least exterior additions to the E.B. White building and be done by that point. So this monies will go a long way to helping that project move forward. So with that background, unless there's any questions, I think we've already got a motion for it. So I'll shut up.
Can you put the amount in the, I think did you mention the amount?
480,000 total, 240 of which comes from NSSF. Say that 5 times fast.
Right.
And the other half, which will be a match from Dominion.
Okay, thank you. I see Council Lady.
And it's designed, by the way. Dominion's ready to go. They're going to do it in the first and second quarter of next year.
Oh, listen, I definitely agree with rapid action on this one. I see Council Lady Parker hands up. Councilwoman Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is Mr. Gandy on the call? What is the total amount in that NSSF fund currently? And what other projects? I know
there's about $11 million, Councilmember Parker, in it right now. We approved about $1 million for some smaller priority projects 2 months ago, which included Mother Emanuel, among others. But there's plus or minus $11 million sitting there right now.
Okay, and do we have a list of, I don't know how long this has been on the list, but I know there are other projects and in and around the city. I mean, can we get an update? I assume Mr. Gandy's not on this call. I mean, I know we talked about this previously, but obviously this is, again, we have a lot of people want this throughout the city. So where where are we on that sort of list, you know, as
I
far
can
as
give-
other projects?
I can give a little bit of insight on that, but I think it would be good to get an update per your request, perhaps at the next Public Works meeting, or we could just have them circulate something in terms of where we are currently. But you have a lot of projects that are in the queue, but you know, it's, as you are well aware, dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's to get final sign off for these. Like Ansonboro has been 18 years, I think, in the making, and they're still, I don't know if they need any more signatures at this point, but it's just a real challenge to get the participation needed for neighborhoods. But as I understand it, what Dominion's doing in the last few presentations I've seen, you can in essence do it street by street now is what they're looking at, different options, and just getting various people on a given street to agree so that it's not an entire neighborhood. And so short answer is that I think there's a list of targeted undergrounding, but the various degrees in which those are readily available to start construction are kind of all over the place. So I'm happy to get Dominion to provide us a breakdown on where that stands.
Okay, thank you. And then, yeah, I mean, maybe, I think as I've asked previously, maybe we can have an update or a presentation and telling us.
If you can hear us, Councilwoman, you're breaking up on our end. Hello? Well, until she gets that straightened out, Councilman Seekings, I see your hand.
Well, just very briefly and follow up to the mayor's comprehensive views on all that. There is a list. It's graded on a matrix. But the projects that they're looking at on that matrix are all very large scale projects like Ansonboro, like larger neighborhoods. And again, you'll remember, Mr. Chairman, I think it was 2 or 3 meetings ago, we took up doing some small, really targeted projects so we could use that money to the benefit of the public. And that's exactly what this motion is to take this project, which already has a transformers in place just to be moved, don't have to look for easements and all that, for a very small amount of the $11 million. I mean, it's really just interest off of that. It should not prejudice any of the other priority projects. I can assure you, I have no interest in doing that because 2 of them are in my district and are really big priority projects, but they're tens of millions of dollars of projects. This is a couple $100,000. So, and Mr. Gandy was on, as you recall, and told us the last time around why we went around the matrix, because it was just attainable micro projects like this one at 141 Meeting Street.
Plus we got a partner in this one, which is
we've got a few of them in this one.
okay. Let's call for the question. I don't see Councilwoman Parker on here, so maybe
She's down, but she's still here.
Councilwoman Parker, did you get to finish what you wanted to address? Yeah,
Breaking up.
Yeah, you're still breaking up, Council Lady. Beyond that, I'm gonna call the question.
Yeah.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Item H, municipal operations site, moving the lines, CSX, all of that. Let's get a motion on it, please.
Move for approval. Second.
Probably moved and seconded. Anybody wants to address that one?
I think we got Ms. Copeland on as well, and Councilman Seeking, glad to have you chime in here. But as I understand it, this has already been contemplated in the budget. It's better off that CSX is agreeing to do the work versus us do it. I do think, you know, the urgency of this is, as Councilmember Seekings pointed out, you know, due to timing and having a crew available to do it. And this is something we would really like to get started, even with the redesign potentially of the city ops building and relocating fire training. This is going to be needed to be done anyway. And it's just part of the initial site work. So I'm glad that we're actually being able to expedite this and completely support moving forward with it.
All right, great. I see Mr. Chase Anderson.
Yes,
come
sir,
live
Mr.
and
Chairman. I'm just here available for any technical information, but I think Councilmember Sinkings and Mr. Mayor covered it very well. We've been working with CSX for many months and really glad to hear that they're going to help us install these large steel casings with an open cut there in their right of way, which gives us a lot less work to do for our on our side of things with our budget. So we appreciate that.
All right.
Their willingness to come to the table, and we appreciate you accepting this at late notice.
Well, thank the commission. They added it to the agenda, so thank you for your input. Sounds like this one's ready to move. All in favor, let's say, let me hear you say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposals? Say nay. It passes. Any other information? As I see it, that's the last item that was on the agenda or added to the agenda. Any other miscellaneous items to be discussed?
Just
Hearing
thank you,
none.
Mr. Chairman, for adding those items on. I think that really was helpful.
Listen, in
Appreciate
less
it.
than 30 minutes, we got a lot of business done.
Sure did.
In a short period of time. Very effective time for everybody. Now I do see Councilwoman Parker hands up. Council Lady Parker.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just one item, when will this committee be talking small project allocation? When will we be deciding on those projects if Mr. Fountain's still on?
Fountain, I don't know if he's still in here. Yeah, he is. Mr.
I'm
Fountain.
still on, Mr. Chairman, but certainly we can schedule that, Mr. Chairman, with you and figure out when we want to bring those forward for funding for the next fiscal or for this fiscal year for next year's work.
That'd be great. Do you need a couple of weeks on that? We meet again, I think on the whatever the fourth Monday of the month is.
I think for this upcoming public works facilities meeting, it might be a little bit close, but for the
tight. Okay, we push
that's
it.
the November meeting.
We push it in November. Okay.
We can do that.
Probably November meeting, Councilwoman Parker, somewhere up in there.
Okay.
Okay,
And just a quick follow-up, if I may.
sure.
So when you've decided, so the 24 allocations have already been decided? Or when do you all normally do? This is my first year on this committee. This is why I asked, because I thought that we would have, I think I was told that this, we do this maybe summertime. If we ever did.
We do generally make a recommendation from the committee to council for funding in the current fiscal year budget for work that will be accomplished in the next calendar year. So
Right.
like in 2024, we are currently working through the projects that were approved in 2023. We'll bring that recommendation for potential projects for 2025 work from this 2024 funding allocation. That's just from the origin of how this started, where the first time we had funding, we were already partway through a calendar year as we got fiscal year funding. That was 4 or 5 years ago. So that'll be the pathway. And it does vary a little bit on when we bring that funding based on how the previous projects are progressing and the schedule for the committee. We switched to the once a month this year, which is shift us a little bit, but we're still working through a number of the projects from the last 2 years. Should be ready to look at additional projects shortly.
And it would be good, Mr. Fountain, that, prior to the November meeting, to get some of that information out on beforehand. So, Councilwoman Parker, believe me, we'll have a good hearty discussion on it. So you'll have your input. Okay. No doubt.
And the 24, and with that presentation, or when we're making those decisions, Mr. Fountain, can you really kind of bring us back up to speed, or at least those of us, myself, on what those 24 projects were for those small project allocations?
For the projects that were funded in 2023 for work in 2024, Mr. Chairman, if you're amenable, we can certainly add that to the agenda as well.
That'll be great. That'll be great. One last question that may help out Mr. Fountain. Do we have an anticipated amount that you're gonna ask to budget for the small projects for 25?
The funding allocations in 2024 are at $1 million again. We did do that same request for 2025 for next year's allocations as well.
hypothetically, if there was another million out there in the universe, do we have the capacity to fit that in?
Not in the 2024 work. We could hypothetically look at it in the 2025 year. We have a
I
project
meant
manager
25. I
still
meant
vacant, but we could certainly take a look at some additional funding. Where there's plenty of work to do. It's just always trying to work through the work.
okay, got you. All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Councilman Gregory.
is it possible for us at our next meeting to talk about how we can increase our revenue for flooding and drainage, and possibly talking about a maybe half-cent sales tax or something, to see if we can get the kind of money that is necessary to really, really go at some of these drainage problems.
Let's look at the budget, but I think that conversation will need to be had. Maybe we ought to have some informal discussions before we put it on the agenda, something that'd be a little bit more targeted. But I hear you loud and clear. You definitely need more streams of revenue. That's my theme. Streams of revenue.
It's the only way.
That's right.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, sir. Councilor Park, I still see your hand. You just forgot to pull it down. Is there another
I
question?
did. I'm sorry.
No
Sorry.
problem. Go ahead. I just want to recognize you. Go ahead.
No, I'm all done. Thank you,
Oh,
Mr.
all
Chairman.
good. Any final comments? Listen, by acclamation, we stand adjourned. See y'all.